Hi, and welcome to Stories of Faith. Stories from the Bible, stories of personal experience, stories of life. I'm Denise Meyer-Pollock, Sacred Storyteller. My pronouns are she, her. Today, I have a guest, Egan the cat. Before we get started, let's take a moment and acknowledge the lands on which all of us are sitting. I acknowledge with respect and thanksgiving the Lekwungen people, the Songhees, the Esquimalt, and the Masanic peoples on whose traditional lands I live, work, learn, and play. Those people have been on these lands since time immemorial. All right, let's get to it. David lived on the farm with his father. And it was David's responsibility to care for the sheep. David's father said to him, "I want you to go to where your brothers are. They are in the army protecting our lands. Bring them food from our home and greetings from me." And so David made sure that there was someone to take care of the sheep, gathered all the belongings he was going to need, and began his journey to where the army for the people of Israel was sitting. When David arrived, there were many people just standing around. And off in the distance, there was a very large person. Then it filled David's ears. It almost made the ground rumble. The person, the man named Goliath, who was the largest man anyone had ever seen, so big, so powerful, so strong, began speaking. "I dare any one of the Israelites to come and fight me, and if you win, we will leave. But if I win, then all the lands of the Israelites will be ours." David went up to many of the people, many of the Israelite soldiers, and asked them, "What's going on? Why isn't anybody confronting him? Why isn't anybody going to fight him? Why isn't anybody protecting the honor of the people of Israel?" Well, the soldiers he spoke to, some of them said nothing. Some of them said, "What makes you think you could do anything?" They got really angry. And one of them went running to the king of Israel, King Saul. King Saul came up and spoke to David and said, "So, why are you saying these things? Why are you challenging people to go and confront Goliath? Look how big he is." And David's response was this: "When I was at home, I would fight lions and bears to keep my sheep safe. God protected me from the lion and the bear. God will protect me now fighting Goliath." King Saul looked at David and said, "Well, may God be with you." King Saul moved off to the side, and David began walking towards Goliath. But then Saul called out, "Wait, wait! I will give you my armor my sword and my shield, and you will be protected." So David took King Saul's armor to protect his body, his sword to have a strong weapon, and his shield to keep his body even safer. And he tried to walk in all of this, but it didn't work. He wasn't used to wearing all this heavy equipment. He wasn't used to carrying a sword. He wasn't used to having a sword in one hand and a shield in the other. So he dropped the sword, dropped the shield, took off all the armor, looked down at his feet and saw some rocks, picked them up, pulled out his slingshot, and put a rock in the cup of the slingshot. He moved closer and closer to Goliath, and Goliath called out, You're so little! You have no armor! I'm gonna squish you like a bug!" David, he took his slingshot, pulled back the cup with the stone in it, aimed, and let it go. The rock flew through the air and hit Goliath right in the middle of his forehead and knocked Goliath down. And Goliath died. There was much celebrating. King Saul approached David and thanked him for saving the people of Israel. Time passed, and David was so close to God, and God was so close to David, that David became king of Israel. You can imagine, for Saul, who had been king, that was hard. It made Saul angry, and sometimes he even tried to find ways to hurt David. But interestingly enough, Saul also had a son named Jonathan. And Jonathan and David, they were best friends. They loved each other so much. They wanted to be together, and they were really special to each other. Time passed, and Saul and Jonathan, they were out at another war, protecting the land of Israel for King David, and they were killed. Saul and Jonathan were gone, and when word got to King David, he was so hurt, so upset that his best friend and the man who used to be king, Saul, had died, that he ripped his clothing. He fell down on the ground. He called out and he cried. He lamented because it hurt him so much. This is a story about the people of God, and this is a story for us. I have two wondering questions. And the first question is, in this story of David and Goliath and Saul and Jonathan and lamenting, what part would you leave out? What part would you take away and still have all we need? My next question is, in this story of sheep and fathers, of fighting and friends, what do you think is the best part? Before we end our time together, let's take a moment to pray. Loving God, in this time of isolation, in this time of sickness and vaccinations, in this time of being away from friends and family, of missing holidays, remind us it's okay to be sad. It's okay when things don't go the way we hope they would. And it's okay to cry. It's okay to lament. Amen. If you liked this story, make sure you subscribe so you don't want to miss any of the future stories. If podcasts are more your thing, check me out wherever you find your podcasts. Sacred Stories of Faith, Denise Meyer-Pollock. Until next time, keep living your life of faith.